We've proclaimed these people to be deities and gods, when in actuality, they just weren't.
And one of the first things they did was to manipulate the weather. So they had to clear the atmosphere of a pall of dust and create enough force to drive water off land.
We would bear the load of the EGG without feeling like we were slaves, because to us it was an honor.
Yahweh is El Shaddai.
Yes.
And there's strong reason to believe that the root meaning of that is the powerful one, the destroyer. And then he goes around illustrating that fact. I mean, you think his introduction, for instance, to Abraham, he introduces himself as El Shaddai. Within 2 chapters, he's incinerated 2 cities.
And to realize that we do have the ability to command realities into existence, because we're a fractal of God itself. When a more advanced race meets a less advanced race of people, the less advanced race will deify them. And that's the true origins of religion. We've proclaimed these people to be deities and gods, when in actuality, they just weren't.
Yes, I think that's right. I think for a long time, anthropologists were very patronizing about our ancestors. And they said, oh, well, many of these god stories are just personifications of the elements. So you'll have a wind god who makes the wind, and a sun god who makes the sun, etc. And I think that's a distortion probably of what happened, because we've got ancestral narratives around the world that talk about the arrival of non-human others who arrived when the planet needed rehabilitating. And one of the first things they did was to manipulate the weather. So they had to clear the atmosphere of a pall of dust and ash and soot so we could now see the sun and the moon and the stars. They needed to rehabilitate land, and they used wind to do that. I think if you are from a primitive culture and you're watching beings who can clear the atmosphere and create enough force to drive water off land, well, you would think these people can do anything. This is where the idea of weather gods came from. I think it came from people who arrived here who were able to manipulate the weather. We didn't mistake the sun for a god or mistake the wind for a god. We saw these things being manipulated and were naturally impressed and naturally thought, well, these are our gods, these are our superiors. And of course, we're going to let them take charge, because look what they're doing for us.
Exactly. And when you look deeper into the nature of humanity and all the genetic modifications that have happened that are still big question marks for modern day geneticists, like, for example, chromosome number 2 being taken out and fused together and 2 telomere caps being put on them, where they mimic, or it mimics exactly what's been said in the biblical text and in the Sumerian tablets. Your years will be 120. We now know that by Harvard scientists investigating this, that because of the telomere caps on chromosome number 2, the average lifespan under the best conditions of a human being should be about 120 years, or the maximum, I say, the maximum lifespan should be 120 years. So we have modern science. Exactly. It's so crazy. It's backing up the ancient text, right? It's right in front of our eyes. And also, with some of this genetic modification, I personally believe that they added something called a worship gene. Because let's take a look at this, first of all. The concept of worship gene suggests that human spirituality and the inclination toward religious experiences must have a genetic component. This is modern genetics university study books now. This idea gained prominence with the geneticist Dean Hammer's 2004 book, The God Gene: How Faith is Hardwired into Our Genes where he proposed that the vascular momain transporter 2, or VMAT2 gene, influences spirituality by affecting the monoamine levels in the brain. They discovered this gene, this worship gene, that's been encoded and embedded into the human genome. It's responsible for packaging neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine into synaptic vessels for release into the synapse. So when we have this urge, this innate urge in us to want to worship something outside of us, and when we do that, we get the release of these hormones and so forth into our body, which makes us feel good. It makes us think we're doing the right thing. And I personally believe that these beings genetically modified us that way so that we could worship them, so that we would do the work for them without feeling like we were slaves. We would bear the load of the EGG without feeling like we were slaves, because to us, it was an honor to work for the gods. It was an honor to take our first harvest and to slay the lamb and bring the offerings. It was an honor. We did it as an honor of the gods. We didn't feel like we were enslaved. And the best kind of slave is a slave who doesn't know he's enslaved. And I believe that's exactly what happened to us.
Well, that's very interesting, because my understanding of that research is that hormone that is produced is actually a very lovely hormone that makes us feel very connected with everything. It's really like a spirituality feeling. Yeah. And so that could certainly be exploited, or it could just be enjoyed. But what's interesting to me is that there's another way in which religion has manipulated us, and that is going to the very primitive part of our brain, which generates our fight, flight, or fright response. And when you look at the distortions of religion to produce, for instance, the doctrine of hell that I mentioned earlier in passing, now you're pressing the fright button, and you've got a flight response from things you think are going to hurt you, and then you've got a paralysis response, the fright response, when you've just been terrorized. I mustn't think for myself. And so it's almost like there's a carrot and stick that was available to those who are managing us in the deep past and those who manage us in the present. I mean, if you want to look at how crowds are controlled today, how governments seek to maintain order in their societies, it's carrot and stick in exactly the same way it ever was. Yeah,
no doubt. Absolutely. And, something interesting about this whole concept of Satan and the devil and how much power he has. It's always a gender-based entity, by the way. He has a lot of power. And I had an experience where I was on the beach and I was just kind of meditating by the water. And a gentleman walked up to me. And when I looked up, he was trying to hand me a bottle of water. So I knew right away he was coming to preach to me, because that's what they do at the beach out here. They walk around and try to catch people off guard and offer them some water so they can start preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ to them. And we got into a conversation about Jesus and the Bible, and he had asked if I had given my life to Jesus, if taken him as my Lord and Savior. And I said no, I hadn't. And he got a little offended, and he said, well, why wouldn't you want to do that? And I said, because I believe I'm directly connected to the divine. God is in me and I'm in God. And so therefore I don't need a middleman. But that led into the conversation of me wanting to just really peer deeper into his understanding of Satan, the devil, because from what I had read in the Gnostic texts and Nag Hammadi and so forth, it really seemed as if what people have been led to believe in the biblical text might be something extremely sinister. And so I said to him, tell me more about Satan, the devil, because now I'm asking him questions I know the answer to. Oh, he's powerful, the right hand of God at one time. He led the other angels astray. He's not an angel himself. He's actually a cherubim. And wherever he goes, music follows him. And he just kept going on and on. Very powerful being. He can whisper in the ears of people and he can get them to do the most horrendous things and so forth and so on. I said, so you're telling me that this being, this Satan, the devil, has a lot of power, which means he probably has a very high IQ. You think he has a high IQ at more than the human being? Oh yeah, much more than a human being, super high IQ. I'm saying this is a really intelligent and extremely powerful being if it can actually whisper in the ears of billions of people and get them to do things. Oh yes, it is. I said, so you're telling me that this super highly intelligent, probably 1,000 IQ being with all this amazing power, almost the same level as God itself, is going to listen to the words written in this book that you call the canonized Bible and go and follow its track to its own demise. Oh yeah, it's going to burn. He's going to be cast into a lake of fire for all eternity. I said, So you're telling me that a book that was written by men and has this laid out plan far in advance, eons in advance, this being is going to follow it? Yes, he has to. I'm like, it's more likely, in my opinion, that this being actually orchestrated this text in the format and the remix that it's currently in to get human beings to follow it to its own demise. And they've been probably chasing and following, without knowing it, the same Satan, the demon, the devils, and everything else, the dark entities that they've been running from. And he gasped. So, I mean, it's a different take and look on what's happened with the original message that I think that the biblical text was trying to impart, with all the remixing, and altering, and the changing and everything else, because there's a lot of great information in the Bible. And matter of fact, there's information I apply to my life on a daily basis in there, right? But it comes down to a certain level of discernment, because you can easily get carried away into believing things like you said earlier. It's okay to dominate and enslave someone, which people did. It's okay to kill these people because in the name of God, I'm killing these people in the name of God. You see? So all these things are okayed by this doctrine, but not realizing, how do I distinguish between what's spiritual and what's man's impact on this text to get me to be manipulated into doing things based on an agenda. And so once we realize that, all of a sudden our eyes are opened, right? The veil has been lifted. And I think that's what people have to begin to understand. There's a much deeper story here. And we can't throw away the baby with the bathwater, but we have to really analyze and break down the information.
That's exactly right. I think once you realize that the word Elohim is a plural, it means the powerful ones, and we're reading the stories of the powerful ones. That's the beginning of reframing how we read the stories of the Hebrew scriptures. And then if you read Psalm 82 or Deuteronomy 32, you'll realize that Yahweh is one of the Elohim. He's in fact a junior member of the Elohim. The council is presided over by someone else, El Elyon. That's the powerful one, more senior than the others. And it's El Elyon who parcels out portions of land to different Elohim. And then Yahweh gets a people group with no land. So that's why I say he's a junior, and he then has to go to war in order to get land for his people group. That frames all these stories of violence and xenophobia, enslavements, all the rest of it, all these perverse laws that get brought in that you were just describing. When you're reading them in the world of faith and you think these are all God's stories, as I said before, you have to park your conscience, you have to park your morality. As soon as you've read the source stories and realize, oh, okay, these are actually retellings of Babylonian and Assyrian stories, you begin evaluating what's happening, and you will call a genocide for what it is. You'll call a murder for what it is. You'll call brutalization for what it is. You'll call a rape for what it is. And once you've done that, you can't go back to seeing it another way. The reason people don't do that is not only they don't know the translation issues, but really through centuries of religious entrainment that have told them the God of the Old Testament is the same as the God of Jesus. But in actual fact, the morality that Jesus teaches in the Gospels is totally incompatible with the morality of the Elohim and Yahweh characters.
Correct.
We're just not allowed to see it. We're not allowed to say it. There are plenty of believers in the churches who will go to their Bible study group leaders, go to their pastors and say, why is God doing this? This doesn't seem right. And they will basically be told one way or another, you can't criticize God. And that's that. Stop thinking about it. And if you keep thinking about it, we'll throw you out. Children get thrown out of Sunday school classes.
Yes.
Adults get thrown out of Bible study groups because they're asking obvious questions. Why are we justifying genocide? Why are we justifying ethnic cleansing? These are obvious questions, but we're not allowed to ask them. That's how strong the taboo is. But I actually think if someone has a Christian faith, they've got a head start to recognizing the paleo-contact narratives in the Bible. They've got a head start to realizing there are other entities in there, because of that incompatibility between Jesus's morality and the morality of the Elohim. And Jesus, in fact, is presented by all the gospel writers, the canonical gospel writers, as a successor to and replacement of Moses, and a giver of laws to delete and replace the laws of Yahweh.
Yeah.
And do you just think through the logic of that? Why is he doing that? Why does he want to set people free from the laws of Yahweh? And then when he stands up in front of the teachers of the Jewish law and refers to your father, the devil, your father who was a murderer and a liar from the beginning, the father of all lies, who on earth is he talking about? When Jesus says, you've heard it said, but I say this. Moses allowed you this, but I say this. It's very clear it's a story of discontinuity between the Old Testament and the New Testament. Discontinuity between Yahwism and what Jesus was on about. And when you get to Acts 15, the early church holds a council and comes to a decision. This is after Jesus has died, and this is now chaired by his brother James. The early church comes to a decision that Christianity is not going to be based on Yahweh's law. You don't have to believe in it. You don't have to follow it. Christianity is going to be something else. And then by the time Paul is writing, he's saying that Jesus took that written code and canceled it with the story of the cross. And so the message of discontinuity is there. It really is clear, but it is religious entrainment that teaches people not to see it. And of course, the problem that you've got a Bible where the Old Testament has been glued to the New Testament. It kind of implies that it's a continuing story, but it isn't. And again, as soon as you see the discontinuity, as soon as you hear Jesus say, what I'm proclaiming is something unknown to you. You do not know me, nor do you know my Father. And he says this to his apostles and to the teachers of the Jewish law. As soon as you see the discontinuity, it becomes obvious. But you have to break out of the religious entrainment, break out of the groupthink, use your own mind, use your own moral conscience, and you will immediately begin seeing the shape of the stories, which are the same in the Bible as they are in the Enuma Elish and the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Myth of Adapa and all these other wonderful Mesopotamian texts.
Right. Absolutely. And I know we're starting to get a little short on time. We still want to do a little Q&A. But real quick, I want to bring up before you go and start the myth of Adapa is we have to look at the Bible from a perspective also as who's doing all the killing in the Bible. I began to really try to break that down because I wanted to see how bad this Satan was, this devil was, right? And the more I researched it, the more I dug, I just couldn't find Satan killing people. But what I did find is I find that God killed about an estimated 3 million people in the Bible. So he's
and when you say God, it's actually the Yahweh character who's doing
Yahweh
it.
character. Yes, it's not the creator of the universe. I want to make a clear distinction. The creator of the universe, the divine spark that created everything in the known universe, possibly even the multiverse, in my opinion, is not in this book. There might be aspects of the spiritual connection that we can have with that creator energy, but a direct reflection of that creator and direct information specifically about the attributes of that creator completely, to me, are elusive or ambiguous at best. And it's really talking about these other lowercase g gods, Enki and Lil, and who have taken on the names of like Yahweh and so forth. And so, the Bible, it says in Isaiah 47, I created the good and I created the evil. Do what I saith the Lord. So God is saying, I'm doing the good and the evil. And when you really analyze all the murders and killing, it's not Satan, the devil, that's doing all the killing. It's God doing all this killing and ordering it, or actually ordering the death and slaughter of millions of people.
And the other name for Yahweh is El Shaddai. Yes. And there's strong reason to believe that the root meaning of that is the powerful one, the destroyer. Mm-hmm. And then he goes around illustrating that fact. Mm-hmm. I mean, you think his introduction, for instance, to Abraham, he introduces himself as El Shaddai. Mm-hmm. Within 2 chapters, he's incinerated 2 cities. Yes.
2 cities, full cities gone. Everybody, men, women, children, animals, everything gone. Yeah. It's crazy. It's really when you begin to really break it down, you're looking at from a psychiatric standpoint. You're looking at a psychopathic narcissist, a sadist. It's really sick, and it's really, really dark.
It is sick, and because it is really put into words many times over through the Hebrew scriptures, where the Yahweh character says to his people, nobody loves you. Nobody loves you except me. And if you offend me, no one can protect you from me because nobody loves you. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is narcissistic abuse. Yes. There's no other name for it. It is psychotic behavior, but we don't name it because we think it's a God story. We don't realize it's actually describing an entity that managed a human population in the past. And until we realize that, we can't make sense of the stories. There's a moment, for instance, in 1 Samuel 8, where the leaders of the tribes of Israel come together and say, we've had enough being governed by Yahweh. We want to get rid of him and his prophets, and we're going to have our own kings. Now, if Yahweh meant God Almighty, that story would be an absolute nonsense. Yeah. But as soon as you look at how Yahweh, the character, behaves, you can fully understand why the tribal leaders would say, we don't want any more governance like this. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Exactly.
So it's there. We are told the story, but we're then encouraged not to notice it.
Yep. Facts. Somebody was asking, like, well, who is God? Like I said earlier in the chat, God is a frequency, and it's our job to tune in. If you can imagine a radio station in your town, it's broadcasting out frequencies and it's sending out different radio stations from one source, 99.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, so forth and so on. And it's our job to pick up those frequencies. Now, I'm 0.99, you're 0.97, and so forth and so on. So our bodies are attuned to pick up a specific frequency of consciousness. That's how we have the illusion of individuality. But understanding that there's only one consciousness, and we are all God walking in the flesh to experience itself subjectively, to see what it's like to be Paul Anthony Wallis. What is it like to be Billy Carson? What is it like to be Valerie Brown, and so forth and so on? Yeah. So it's experiencing itself subjectively through us, but not only through us, through every atom that exists, even in the known universe. It's experiencing what it's like. What it's like to be a rock. What is it like to be a blade of grass? This is a data collection mission, and all of us and everything is transmitting information, in my opinion, back to source, so that it can paint a bigger picture of what it's like to be here.
Exactly. Now, the Apostle Paul has a way of saying what you just said, Billy, which I absolutely love. When people say, so who is God? Sometimes that can be a bargaining question, because there's still a God concept that maybe the person's wanting to keep a hold of. And we need to be a bit bolder, a bit braver, go beyond that question and say, what is God? Mm-hmm. And the Apostle Paul has this quote where he's describing what he means by theos, the Greek word for God, to a non-religious audience. And he says, this is in Acts 17, he's in Athens. And he says, by God, I mean the source of the cosmos and everything in it, that in which we all live and move and have our being, of which we are all offspring. So it's saying what you're saying, that we're all emanations of the source. My intelligence is a participation in the intelligence of the cosmos. My consciousness, participation in the consciousness of the cosmos. And it's a much more cosmic vision of God that Paul gives in that moment that I find very helpful. It's very close to what Plato meant by theos, by the Greek word for God. And that was the thinking that was really in people's minds at the time that the gospel writers were doing their work. And there were early church fathers who said that actually it's the Greek philosophers, people like Plato, who give us a better bridge into what Jesus was on about than the Old Testament. And they're very subtly saying, don't approach Jesus through the Old Testament because it will distort your picture. Get this much more cosmic idea of what's going on, and then you'll tap into what Jesus was on about far more accurately. Unfortunately, a lot of those church fathers got ignored. But in my work in the Eden series, I'm going back to them and saying, I think they were on the money.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. Let's get into the myth of Adapa, and then after you start, what you have to say, I'll jump in and we'll kind of wrap this up and get into some Q&A.
Well, the myth of Adapa, I won't go through as I've gone through the other texts. I'll just point out some things in the text. First of all, there's a different vision of humanity, what we are, what we're capable of, and it just embraces what we were talking about. And I know you'll come back to this in a moment, Billy, so I'll let you make that point.
Cool.
But the reason I think it's worth reading the myth of Adapa is that in that story, the human being is tricked by Enki. So Enki is playing a different role in that story than he plays in the Atrahasis story, for instance. So in the Atrahasis story, Enki is our friend. He's wanting to upgrade us. He's wanting us to have the best human experience possible. In the myth of Adapa, Anu is actually offering us something wonderful, something transcendent, something immortal, and Enki tricks the human so that he won't become immortal, and he tricks him into not eating something, if I remember correctly. So we've got a story around food again, a bit like the Genesis 3 story, the fall story, where food is associated with immortality. In Genesis 3, it's the God character who says, eat the food and you will die. And it's the serpent character who says, oh no, you'll become like the gods. It'll actually go the other way. So I mention that because sometimes people like to make a direct equation of one Mesopotamian character with one biblical character. Oh, Enlil is Yahweh, Enki is the serpent. But here we've got Enki playing a totally different role to what he's done in another story. And so when we come across these stories, we need to take them each on their own. It's a story with its own message, a moral of the story, and then we process that. And then we read another story, another message, another moral of the story. But I would say you can't harmonize the myth of Adapa with the Enuma Elish and the Atrahasis, because they actually don't quite fit together.
Right.
And it reminds us that what we are reading is stories that have been told to carry memory. And we can't read them as if we're reading science, a textbook, history. They are stories, but they are carrying real information. And so we have to get into a place where we can be a bit more playful and creative in how we read. If we go in with an anxious mindset of, oh, I've got to work this out, I've got to work out who's who and what's what, you're not going to get it. You need to be able to read poetry like it's poetry and prose like it's prose. And you need to be in a much more creative space. And the myth of Adapa is the one piece of literature that will really make that point to you, because you won't be able to square it with those other books. And yet it is full of very inspiring information about human beings and what we're capable of. So that was all I really wanted to say about the myth of Adapa.
That's beautiful. Absolutely. And so when we look at Adapa, we're talking about a Mesopotamian text that claims there's this man named Adapa. And Adapa is a human that is described as possessing divine wisdom granted by the god Ea Enki. And his wisdom is setting him apart because it's almost making him godlike, the amount of knowledge and wisdom in the human body. And Adapa, basically, he has this all imbued into him. It's in his body. He has all this wisdom and all this knowledge. And Enki is the god who is really looking over him, basically. And Enki made him perfect. He endowed him with ultimate wisdom, but he didn't give him eternal life. So Adapa has all this knowledge and all this grace and all this intelligence, but because he doesn't live for eternity in the flesh, he's not a quote unquote God, right? So he's portrayed inherently powerful, possessing wisdom. He has the divine knowledge, but he's mortal. And Adapa's understanding allows him to interact with the cosmic order. And so he has the capability of tapping into the source, just like, again, Star Wars, right? If you can remember when Yoda and what was the gentleman's name there?
Obi-Wan?
Not Obi-Wan, but the other one who was his Padawan. He just got started, the Jedi, the young Jedi, in the one of the 1977.
Anakin.
Yeah, not it might have been Anakin. Maybe not Anakin. Luke Skywalker. Thank you. There you go. Luke. Okay. Yeah, Luke Skywalker. So him and Luke crash land in a bog on some planet, some swamp. And so Yoda decides to use this as a teaching moment and gets Luke to try to tap into the force, because everything is energetically connected, to lift the ship out of the swamp and put it on dry land so they can rescue themselves, basically. And Luke is trying and he's trying and he's just not making it happen. And so then Yoda, he taps into this force, right? He's tapping into what the myth of Adapa is calling the cosmic order and the mastery over natural forces. And he taps in and he lifts the ship out of the swamp, puts it on dry land. And then Luke Skywalker runs over and he says, I can't believe it. And Yoda says, that is why you fail. So a great teaching moment there in Star Wars, right? But we know that Adapa had demonstrated his power and mastery over natural forces. There was a situation where, let me see what it was here. I think I have it in my notes. Let me just look at my notes real quick. Okay, there's a situation where he breaks the south wind's wing. He demonstrates mastery over natural forces with godlike power. With the wisdom Ea had given him, Adapa knew how to calm the wind to control the waters. This implies that humans, through divine insight, have the ability to influence and interact with universal forces. So he had the same power as what we would consider a divine being inside this physical corporeal body known as a human being and having mortality. So we have that same power within us. We have the same access to that within us. We've just been disconnected. We've forgotten who we truly are, right? And so the lesson in the myth of Adapa is teaching us about basically a few key things. You know, what it's really trying to show us is that we are powerful and incredible beings, that human beings possess divine knowledge and power, potentially rivaling the gods themselves. And that actually made it into the biblical text. So when you look at the myth of Adapa, you know, what happens, Paul, when the angels are jealous of humanity? Why were they jealous of us?
Exactly.
God's creation, and potentially, why did God love us so much and make us this way and give us all this ability? They were worried that we would rival them and we would surpass them.
Exactly. Right? Exactly.
And then, of course, go ahead.
I was just going to echo that view of humanity. It's actually there in the Gospels as well. Mm-hmm. So in the message that Jesus toured with in the first year of his ministry, according to the Matthew's Gospel, you go to the root meanings of the words, and he's saying, go beyond the mind, which is metanoia, the repent word, go beyond the mind, because the whole basileon uranun, that's the whole cosmic realm, has come close, is available, can be reached out and taken hold of. Mm. And that's an invitation. That's an invitation to learn what it means to manipulate the forces of the cosmos, to find our power. It's an invitation to go and explore. But the way it's translated, all that gets edited out.
Yeah, that's right. And so what we need to understand here is that, through the myth of Adapa text, we discover that we have no limitations except for mortality. And that's not even a limitation, because we are already eternal. We are already the part of the divine energy force that creates everything in the known universe, even in higher dimensions. And so because of that, we can learn now how to walk in our power, to understand how truly powerful we are, and to realize that we do have the ability to command realities into existence, because we're a fractal of God itself. We have the capability of speaking things into existence and manifesting realities. And for people who don't believe that we can do that, just look around you. The fact that you have a device that you're looking at right now to hear my voice and hear Paul's voice from all around the world, it speaks volumes on the human ability to manifest realities. Somebody thought about this technology on the consciousness platform, and they collapsed that conscious idea into 2D by drawing it out on paper or putting it into a computer, which becomes still 2D, even though it might look 3D, computer-assisted design. From there, they take that information about that technology and they send it over to an engineer who then manifests it into a three-dimensional reality that you can move around on the XYZ axis. So what happened? From multi-dimensional thoughts, we collapsed this technology into reality that it actually exists with us here now, and we can actually use it and engage with it.
Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for the Caribbean. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for the Caribbean. Coming for the Caribbean.